conversation out in the lobby if they could be nimble. Come back inside. All right. It is my great joy to introduce to you one of my dearest friends, John Basie. Dr. Basie is the director of the Impact 360 residency program. He also serves as an affiliated professor of leadership at North Greenville University. Many of you know that we have a strategic partnership with the Impact 360 Institute. We offer a Master of Arts in Leadership in conjunction with that organization. It's our degree, but it's their residents who are the students in that program. And so on Impact 360's end, Dr. Basie is the one who oversees that residency program and teaches a couple of the courses in our Master of Arts in Leadership at North Greenville. He has been there for a number of years, 2 different times, but in between has also served in administrative leadership roles at Columbia International University. He served as the Chief Academic Officer at Erskine, right down the road, and is an Erskine alum. Did his PhD at Baylor University. Dr. Basie is a very thoughtful, reflective leader when it comes to a variety of matters related to the intersection between faith and culture, whenever it comes to Christian higher education. But one of the things that he knows a lot about that we're very interested in is Generation Z, and how do we navigate these young people that are in all of our undergraduate programs and slowly taking over our graduate programs with every passing semester. And so that's the theme that Dr. Mathis has really asked him to address with us today, is navigating Generation Z, understanding that generation, and applying that to our work as Christian educators at North Greenville University. So join me in welcoming Dr. John Basie.
Thank you, Dr. Finn. That was most generous. It is so good to be with you all this morning. I've had the opportunity over the years to get to know a number of you, and some of you I'm sure I'll be meeting for the first time today, but I came in for the last third of Dr. Finn's address, and I wholeheartedly, 100% agree. North Greenville University is an incredibly special place. In the time that I've been affiliated here as an affiliated faculty member and just friend of the university, I have come to see through visits here and through you all, some of you having visited our campus, how the Lord truly uses you all and this place to implement His Great Commission, and we're going to talk about that a good bit today. But before we do, I want to introduce a little bit about me personally. I find that to be a little helpful. This is my family, and Marana and I have been married for 26 years. Her name, Marana, is short for Maranatha. Those of you who are biblical scholars would know that's Aramaic for our Lord comes, or come Lord Jesus. And the T-H-A, is actually the emphasis, the exclamation point. So it's said with enthusiasm. Why did her parents name her this? It's not a common name. Well, it has to do with her adoption story, which is pretty incredible. Her mother, her birth mother, initially had decided for abortion, and the doctor, she was born in 1975, not that long after Roe v. Wade was legalized. And the doctor said, well, you have another choice. And would you want to talk about that? And by God's grace, her birth mother did. And meanwhile, her adoptive parents, John and Sarah Ellen Carson, had been struggling for quite a number of years to have children. And long story short, things came together and they were able to adopt Marana. And in celebration of what the Lord had done, they named her this amazing, wonderful name. And she certainly has been that blessing to me and our kids. To the left of me is Rachel. She is a rising senior. And my great hope is that the Holy Spirit would just lead her right here to North Greenville University. I'm dead serious. We visited a number of times. She's, I think, highly inclined. She's probably going to do our fellows program, our gap year program at Impact first. But I'm very hopeful that after that she'll be here. Our other two, to the left of Marana, is Patrick and Rebecca Ruth. Patrick is a rising sophomore, an engineering major at Union University, your sister institution, and another one of our partners. And then Rebecca Ruth, our middle child, will be a freshman at Union this coming semester, double majoring in philosophy and psychology. So that's us. Impact 360 residency, as Dr. Finn explained, is our program, the container that holds the MA in leadership degree. And we are just so excited to partner with you on this. You have had some outstanding faculty, all of which have done an amazing job in teaching for this program. It is a 36-hour Master of Arts degree. I promise this will be the only infomercial, but we would love to get more NGU applicants for this program. What makes it special? Well, it's in Pine Mountain, Georgia, God's country, as you pointed out. Secondly, if students get in, they pay very, very little in tuition. It's highly subsidized, and they pay nothing for their hard costs. We take care of their room, their board, all program-related travel, plus they are all graduate assistants working with 18-year-olds in our holistic discipleship model, so they get paid to do that. So they're getting that hands-on experience as they live with us for 2 years, earning their MA degree from North Greenville University. This is our vision statement, equipping young professionals to be culture-shaping, Christ-centered servant leaders in their various vocations. Some will go on to full-time Christian service. Some will go on, as they have, in the for-profit business world. Some will be nonprofit leaders, and we're seeing them go in all of those directions. We're very grateful to Doctors Larry McDonald, Alan McWhite, Jill Rayburn, Dr. Finn, and Webb Drake for the outstanding instruction that they have brought to this program, so thank you all. And now for what we're here to talk about, Gen Z. I don't proclaim to be an expert. We have some experience with this. Just like you do, you're serving the same demographic as we are, and I realize some of you are primarily involved in graduate education, so you're educating all ages, and I understand that. But eventually Gen Z is going to make its way up to where you are in terms of the age bracket. We had the opportunity a number of years ago to partner with the Barna organization to do some empirical research on Gen Z. And at the time, in 2018, when that research was unfolded, it was the very first worldview research on Gen Z. Now, others have come along since that time, but we were very, very pleased and grateful to the Lord that we could be on the front end of that. So let's get into it. Who is Gen Z? Well, first of all, they're image bearers, just like all of us. They're not some other species. Maybe we should talk about that. There are 2 billion of them worldwide, 70 million in the U.S. Depending on the study you take a look at, that might vary by a few million, give or take. But who are they? Who are they? What are some of the characteristics that we see are not necessarily defining them, but the characteristics that they are likely to take on? First of all, they're screenagers. What does this mean? Is this a new term that I have coined? No. I'm not sure who coined it. I think it may have been the Barna organization itself. But think of it this way. They are the first generation, for most of whom have a very difficult time remembering when mom or dad did not have some kind of smart device in their hand. I've had a few over the last couple of years claim that they remember a time when mom or dad did not. And they're probably telling the truth. But most of them do not remember a time when smart devices did not exist. It's just baked into the warp and woof of their daily and weekly rhythms. They are conflict averse. They do not like conflict. Now, is it fair to say that other generations do like conflict? Well, probably not. But older generations, in my experience, are far less averse than this generation is. We'll talk a little bit more about that. True security is outside of their control. They are the survivors of a global pandemic, as all of us in the room are. But think about the difference. How much life have all of us lived prior to the pandemic? And how much life have Gen Zers lived prior to the pandemic? Think about the shaping influences of that at such an early stage in their life. One of my undergraduate majors, for what it's worth, was psychology, and so I very much appreciate what developmental psychology can bring to the table in helping us think these things through. They are over-parented and underprotected. In the book that some of you may have had the chance to take a look at, Know, Be, Live, which is our signature book from the Impact 360 Institute, we have a chapter just on this topic. And basically what we discovered through the research and then writing that book, that volume, is that parents of Gen Z tend to be Gen Xers and maybe some of the millennials, but for the most part, Gen Xers. We tend to overparent. We tend to think that safety has mostly to do with physical safety. We're not quite as vigilant as it comes to protecting them in the virtual space and helping them develop guardrails and resilience in the virtual space. And then finally, their worldview is post-Christian. Teens 13 to 18 years old are twice as likely as adults to say they are atheist. I tend to think that versus when this research was done a few years ago, I think that number is going to be higher than what you see here. And then half of them agree that happiness is the ultimate goal in life. This probably is not too much of a surprise to you, but it can be helpful to see that yes, the empirical research is verifying your intuitions. What are some of the realities that are influencing Gen Z? Well, what about mental health issues? Is anyone seeing an uptick in these? Would anyone say, no, it's actually better? It's better than 10 years ago. Anybody? I mean, maybe. I'm a philosopher by training. I'm open to objections. But I struggle to think of anyone who is currently serving in higher education, secular or Christian or whatever, that would say, no, yeah, it's actually better than 10 years ago. What's something else? They have real-time awareness of national and global tragedies, okay? The mass shootings, in addition to the global pandemic, we hear about these all the time. They are updated on their social media feeds constantly. There's almost no break from it. They sense constant pressure to perform academically and in extracurricular activities. Now, you might be thinking, well, I don't necessarily see that their performance is reflecting that they feel that pressure. Fair enough, fair enough. But that's something we could unpack a little bit later. They feel a constant burden of being on for the smartphone. Now, this is something that prior to my really digging into it, I hadn't really given much thought to. When you're constantly on, even if it looks like you're having fun, don't you think your brain chemistry is probably a bit different? The fact that you're almost constantly on as a young person. You're ready to smile. You're ready to look happy for what will eventually appear on all kinds of social media feeds for your followers. What does that do in terms of shaping a person at that age? For the neuroscientists, educators, psychology people in the room, when is it typically understood that the brain is pretty much set? What age? 25. Thank you. Yes. When my own kids, who themselves are Gen Zers, I don't say this as much as I used to, but when we would sit down to talk about a mistake they had made, thoughtless mistake, I would say to them, okay, now pretend for a minute that you just turned 25 and therefore your brain is set until retirement and when it starts to decline. But just pretend for a minute that you're 25. Now imagine what you would have done differently given that you're 25 instead of 14. And they think that's just a terrible dad joke. But it's okay. Now what about this one? Dr. Finn tells me that somehow you all have figured out how to encourage parents not to ever contact you directly. How do you do this? Has that gotten better or worse in the course of your teaching careers? This afflicts us as well, okay? And I use that word intentionally. Not that there are never appropriate times to have parent-professor conversations, but is this not now the norm for many students rather than the exception? And their identities, as we were saying a moment ago, they have been so shaped by the pandemic, they have come to see themselves, many of them, as the pandemic population. And all the economic fallout that they have seen coming from that. This is from Tim Elmore's recent book, A New Kind of Diversity. If you're familiar with Tim Elmore, he's quite helpful as it comes to these kinds of statistics. He himself is a Christ follower, in case you don't know his work. What about Gen Z in the workforce? In the work setting, they're the most ethnically diverse generation. This is important for us to pay attention to. This is something that we're working on at Impact 360 Institute We would like to see our own population reflect more of what the new heavens and new earth will be, as you all, I'm sure, are desirous of achieving as well. We think we are, in God's grace, making some headway on that, but we can always do better. Multitasking, can you believe this? Have you seen this in your classrooms? I see a few chuckles. Now, this isn't even talking about the classroom yet. This is the workforce. This is the workforce. We're going to come back to the classroom in a moment. 70% report that salary is a top motivator. This generation, more than older generations, is saying earlier in their lifetimes that salary and economic concerns are at the top of their priority list. Health insurance, extremely important. 60% say they would do weekend work if a higher rate of pay for the weekend were offered. Only 38% report a high value for work-life balance. Something for us to certainly pay attention to in terms of setting good habits. 90% want routine in-person contact with others versus a virtual-only work environment. Now, I do think this is not contradictory to many of the workplace studies that we're seeing that show that Gen Zers are very interested in hybrid workplaces. How many, an HR person would be very familiar with this question? Okay, what kind of work from home culture do you have? Can I work from home 2 or 3 days a week? Way more common now, post-pandemic, than before. But they still want in-person contact. They do get worn out by screens all the time. 40% want daily interactions with their boss. And this is one of the adjustments that I have to confess that I have had to make, and I've not fully arrived. It's a constant effort on my part. But they want feedback more than previous generations. They want more frequent feedback. My son just finished an engineering internship with a local factory that they engineer and assemble rail car movers. I didn't even know this kind of thing existed before he got the internship, but apparently there's a need for private rail yards to have huge machines that can pull cars around the rail yards, and they're called rail car movers. Anyway, he found that his supervisor, a millennial, just was not inclined towards as much feedback offering as what my son Patrick wanted. And that's where our conversations about, okay, what do you need to do to get more of what you think you need? And also, how would you know if you're asking too often? How would you know if you're asking too often? And I said to him, now this is a term that one of our former our chief HR people used to say to us at the Institute. And had she lived, she died of cancer, unfortunately, but had she lived, one of her projects was going to be to create an assessment to try to detect what she called emotional expensiveness. Emotional expensiveness. How emotionally expensive are we as people? Now that, the first time I heard that, I thought, ooh, let me think about that. And if I'm really brave, let me go ask some colleagues, how emotionally expensive am I? Ooh, that could be a tough one. Now, we're talking about Gen Z and nobody else, of course, you understand. But Gen Z can be very emotionally expensive. And it has to do with their self-regard, y'all. One of the things I got to do here a year or 18 months ago or something like that was work with Dr. Finn and the Council of Deans on emotional intelligence. And we got to do an emotional intelligence workshop. And we do this at the Institute with our Gen Z students. And I can tell you from doing over 200 of these assessments that their self-regard on average is just in the tank. Their confidence is extremely, extremely low, which then helps us understand why they want so much feedback. Okay. Now, what about Gen Z in college? This is why we're here. You've heard of the demographic cliff, right? So the Great Recession is going to result in fewer college-bound students in a very, very short amount of time. Supposedly, the Midwest, the Northeast, the West are going to be harder hit than the Southeast. We'll see. But hopefully, in God's good providence, we will continue to get exactly the right number of students and exactly the right kind of students that we need at places like this. Now, what about this? You see this has been going on for quite a number of years. Very interesting article in the Wall Street Journal in 2021 that pointed this out, and the stats are being updated all the time. The oldest of them have been shaped by concerns fomented by the Great Recession, financial security. This is why so many of them come into college saying financial security for me is the most important thing. You may not experience that as much here at North Greenville University. My guess is you hear it a good bit, but probably less than, say, Clemson University down the road or perhaps another private but no longer religious college down the road. They tend to want an education they can quickly apply to the real world. Application is incredibly important. They are focused on personal success. They want a dependable career. Now, here's what's interesting. They come to an institution of higher education ostensibly to earn a 4-year degree, yes? But they are less convinced than prior generations that said degree will result in a good job following graduation. Which raises the question, okay, then why exactly are you here? And there are so many things to unpack in that question. But one of them is, well, this is what my parents did. Now, you all serve an amazing, just part of your mission, and I love it, is serving first-gen students. It's incredible. And because of that, my guess is baked into your culture is this understanding that you're helping them see, yeah, paying for life is a good thing, but we're here to be formed, right? We're here to be formed, not just get paid for what we think we're qualified to do. A little bit more data on this juxtaposition between their dream job and their skepticism about education. This is quite something. Yeah, I'll just let you take that in for a moment. Yeah, sorry about that. Basically, what they want is a really good job, okay? They want a good job, but this data is just showing that as you dig down into greater detail, they are less and less convinced that what they are actually doing in the classroom is going to be relevant to them getting that kind of job, all right? One of these statistics is showing how they are just not convinced that what they're learning in the classroom is sufficiently applicable to what happens after college.
What's their definition of a
pay the bills, and hopefully set myself up well for retirement. Also, they are not 100%, but more than prior generations, they are very concerned about debt. Very concerned about debt. Now, you still have a fair number that take out the loans, but versus the millennial generation, who, for the most part, weren't concerned about those loans because they saw, oh, yeah, the Gen Xers, the boomers, they were able to get jobs. No problem. I'll be able to pay off those loans. Well, didn't turn out to be the case for the millennials. The Gen Zers have seen that for the most part, and add to that complexity the pandemic, the Great Recession, and many of them are just doing this to debt, which may help explain some of the demographic cliff that could be coming our way as well. Now, what about this? These next few slides could be a little uncomfortable, perhaps not. Those of you who are digging into these things, you're used to it, but gender and sexuality, there is a new normal. And just take a look at the difference between Gen Z and other generations. Percentage of adults who believe that there are more than two genders by generation. Now let that sink in for a moment. 51%. 51% for Gen Z. They would affirm there are more than two genders. Continuing on this, LGBTQ identification by generation in 2022. Gallup, this is from Gallup, highly reputable source. Generation Z, almost 20% would self-identify as LGBTQ, which is almost twice as much as the millennials. Now, this is me talking, and I think I would probably have a lot of you agreeing with me. Our culture is cheering these things on. The media feeds that our Gen Z students look at are cheering these things on for the most part. But there's nothing new under the sun. This is really just a new version of an old problem. And I'm absolutely convinced that the evil one is hitting them, attempting to hit them where they are the most vulnerable. Liberalism, there's nothing new under the sun. So this is T.S. Eliot from Christianity and Culture, 1948. Liberalism tends to release energy rather than accumulate it, to relax rather than to fortify. It is a movement not so much defined by its end as by its starting point, away from rather than towards something definite. Our point of departure is more real to us than our destination, and the destination is likely to present a very different picture when arrived at. And he goes on to talk about licensing the opinions of the most foolish by substituting instruction for education, by encouraging cleverness rather than wisdom, the upstart rather than the qualified, by fostering a notion of getting on to which the alternative is a hopeless apathy. And doesn't this go hand in hand with some of the mental health challenges that we were talking about a few slides previous to this one? Let me be as nuanced as I can. I do not believe that there is some incredibly coordinated, monolithic liberal culture that is 100% unified, working against what we're doing, I wouldn't give them that much credit. But I do think there's an evil one who, and his minions, who are seeking to influence people, image bearers, mind you, they are image bearers, but image bearers with a faulty worldview, to try to coordinate as much as they can. And even if they don't like coordinating with other people, they're throwing their opinions out there. Some of them are influencers. They're extremely well thought of in terms of higher education, in terms of the tech industry. This is nothing mysterious. But folks, it is an agenda. It is an agenda. And I think it's only going to get harder as the years go on. And I think it'll get harder before it gets easier. J. Gresham Machen, 1923, wonderful conservative New Testament theologian, had this to say about liberalism. It's no wonder then that liberalism is totally different from Christianity, for the foundation is different. Christianity is founded upon the Bible. It bases upon the Bible both its thinking and its life. Liberalism, on the other hand, is founded upon the shifting emotions of sinful men. Now, if it's the shifting emotions of sinful men that the enemy is capitalizing on, I would say he's doing a pretty good job. A pretty good job. But it doesn't stack up to the solid rock foundation that we have in terms of eternal truth. So, I'll leave you with a question. This morning's session had one objective. This afternoon's will have another. This morning, what I was hoping to do is make the case, raise the need. This afternoon, after lunch, my hope is to present some potential solutions and to learn from you through some Q&A. But to leave you with David Kinnaman, who is now president of the Barna Research Organization. He asks this question: is it possible that many churches are preparing young Christians to face a world that no longer exists? I want to reframe the question this way for our purposes. I hope that this isn't the case. And yet, as I talk with colleagues across the country who also serve in Christian higher education, I fear that it is the case in some instances. I do see this institution as a beacon of light, a beacon of hope. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to partner with you all. But we can't take the enemy for granted. So with that, let me pause here. We'll pick up on the next slide in my next presentation. Do we have a few minutes for Q&A? Okay. Questions? Observations? Accusations are welcome. Yes.
John, thank you for your thoughtful presentation. I saw, promotion for a new book that came out a couple of years ago, and it really shocked me, and it's something that I think ties into what you just said, and your question here. But in this book, they were dealing with the issue that in the past, the question that the culture was asking about Christianity is it true? And so we spent all of our energies and efforts to combat all of those things that lead someone to disbelieve the resurrection. We want to provide the best historical context for Christianity to show this wasn't just a mythical type of thing. It was actually something that happened. Of course, that's the way I was trained as a biblical scholar. But the claim in this book was that's not the question this culture is asking. They are now asking, is Christianity good?
Yeah.
And that really slapped me in the face. Because first of all, I hadn't thought of that. I hadn't realized it. And that changes everything about the way we present the truths of Scripture. And we need to refocus, I think. And I've tried to start refocusing, realizing that a culture that says it's your inner feelings that determine who you are, then those inner feelings have to be met in some satisfactory way. And if Christianity says, yes, but your inner feelings are a result of your sinful nature, and that's not good in their mind.
Yeah.
You're calling me a sinner. That hurts my feelings. That takes away a sense of meaning or identity that I have. And there's an immediate sort of wall that goes up. I'm telling you that to me is very much an issue that I hope you're thinking on and have intent to deal with this question.
Yeah, it's a key question, and I think it's, and I appreciate you raising that. That's been raised in a number of other settings that we've been able to take part in as well. That very quote. Could this be perhaps one of the unfortunate side effects of cultural Christianity falling away? Well, maybe. One notable scholar, a Jesus follower, has said of cultural Christianity, let it fall. Let it fall. And we will, with God's help, with the power of Christ, pick up the pieces because we do have eternal truth. But what does it take? And in our afternoon session, we're going to get into what do we mean by holistic discipleship? What would it take to perhaps reframe our understanding of what discipleship actually is? I think for the most part, our students tend to think, when they hear the term discipleship, they tend to think of mostly churchly type of gatherings, mostly otherworldly. But to get to your question, is Christianity good? Wouldn't it be the case that we're going to have to help them see, well, what if discipleship actually started in Genesis 1 with the cultural mandate? It is good. It is good. How many times did he say that? After each day of the creation, right? It is good. It is good. And then Adam. I'm not going to finish the garden. You finish the garden. So from the very beginning, we see what Kinnaman and others, Tim Keller, have coined the term vocational discipleship. God showed them, here's how I want you to do it. Here's what I would like you to do. But then there's a transfer of ownership in the work itself. Is Christianity good? Is the material world itself good? I think we're going to have to revert. We're going to have to explore what a discipleship, if I could call it, construct, a discipleship construct and way of thinking about it, not just methodology, but philosophy. A discipleship philosophy would mean without the cultural mandate at this point. Okay, one more.
They're striving for safety. Does that indicate, the susceptibility to totalitarian thought? In other words, the demanding of conformity that exists. In other words, they are conflict avoidance, but it seems like more they demand no debate. They demand a consensus to avoid a conflict. Is that leading towards a totalitarian worldview?
I think it can. I think it can. I think it can result in a totalitarian type of worldview. I think a fair number of steps have to take place before we would get there. So I would definitely want to nuance that. One of the things that I do think plays into Gen Z's safety mindset and being so conflict averse as they are is, as I was saying before, and I've seen the raw numbers on their confidence scores, their self-regard scores. Folks, this goes hand in hand with the degree to which they hold an internal versus an external locus of control. Internal locus of control, I believe that I have the ability to shape the world around me to some degree. External locus of control, if that's mostly how we are oriented, then we tend to be the kind of people who would say, well, things just happen to me. Things are just constantly happening to me. And I can't understand why. And interestingly enough, and we're toying with this at Impact 360 Institute, this also, external locus of control goes hand in hand with a need for drama. A need for drama. We are experimenting in our graduate program with a number of assessments. And one of them is a fully, it's been tested, it's been written up in a peer-reviewed journal. It's called the Need for Drama Assessment. And as we continue to intellectually disciple Gen Z, what we're seeing is that one of the key ways in which they can be distracted from their studies is if they are so constantly consumed in their minds and even outside of their minds with drama. The drama of friends, the drama of social media, the drama of work, the drama of family. Okay, now some of these things do happen to them outside of their control, and I understand that. But many of them unconsciously are drawn to it. They don't even know the depths of their own fallenness in this regard. And so I would answer your question in a more fulsome way than what I had originally intended. But I do think that there is a connection there between internal and external locus of control. If internal locus of control biblically means anything, it means this: fill and subdue the earth. Have confidence that God has said, I've given you rulership. I've given you rulership over my creation. Now, in certain contexts, I would be booed off the stage just by using the word rulership. Thankfully, that's not true here. But I don't believe that even most Gen Z Christians have a substantial, meaty, weighty understanding of what it means to rule, and to be faithful stewards and servants in the rulership itself. Hopefully we can get into that after lunch. Thank you for your time. I look forward to it.